help yourself to that. We are so glad that you're here. Let me just say, just very briefly, a couple of things. First of all, you know, because that's why you're here, we're going to be talking, or Steve will be telling us a little bit about gun rights and laws that are happening. That's what's drawn each of us here. And so we're delighted to talk about that. But I need to make one thing clear. The ministry of the Man Cave is not about being political activists. The ministry of the Man Cave, you see a big cross on the wall, is because those of us who are there believe the most important thing in our life is to know Jesus Christ in a personal way. I got to just get that out there, okay? Because that's more important than any gun laws that we could ever talk about. So we've got that. Now, a weekend ago, I was away with Steve, and there were 11 of us at a district meeting, and we got onto this topic. In about 2 minutes, I realized I had just gotten an education on something I knew nothing about, and Steve knows it well. And that's when I asked him if he would come, and we made it available to whoever might want to be here. So, as if you happen to see the video, I actually said, and I mean it, you're going to hear tonight from probably the most knowledgeable guy on this topic up in our corner of the state. This guy knows his stuff, and he's a great communicator. You'll be glad that you're here. He's going to share whatever he has, and then we're going to open it up for a Q&A. And hopefully you'll leave here knowing you got an education as well. Is that okay? All right. May the Lord bless us. So we have prayed for the evening, so if you're just getting here, don't think we've overlooked that. And Steve, please take it away. Welcome, Steve Porter. Would you please?
Thank you. All right, thank you, guys. I'm going to hold a microphone tonight because I've been coughing and sniffling, so if I got a cough or sniffle, done, right? So I'm going to give you a brief introduction here real quick, okay? How did I get to know all these senators, and how did I get on the path to be politically activated and trying to steer our state in the proper direction? I've been almost 30 years in law enforcement. I'm running a deer farm, and so I knew the laws real well. Ran a deer farm, got attacked by the state, wanting to run me out of business. I'm going to give you about 2 minutes of this just so you know my history, okay? Got attacked by the state, running me out of business, breaking my constitutional rights, taking away my income, depriving me of my income, to the point where on one occasion they passed a law that I could not move my deer around the state. And they said, if you bring your deer to a sports show, you're going to get a ticket. And I said, well, I've looked at the law. You don't have the authority, Minnesota DNR. You don't have the authority, so I'm going to go to the sports show. And I'll see you in court. And you're going to give me subpoena power. That'll be interesting because I've always been on the other side of the equation. But subpoena power is a beautiful thing. We'll see you in court, and I'm going to subpoena you guys and get you on a stand under oath and ask you a lot of really good questions and expose your corruption. So I go to the sports show. I get a ticket. People are coming to the sports show, high-fiving me for standing up to the DNR and fighting for my constitutional rights. I have a judge come there. He's a short guy in a suit. And I'm talking to him. I said, what do you do for a living? I'm a judge down here. And he says, I came because I read about you in the paper. You're in all the papers, radios, newspapers, everything. It's a big deal. Ex-sheriff's fighting with the DNR. Doesn't care about disease, they said. And I said, what do you think about the case? He said, they don't have a leg to stand on. I said, oh, good. So I left the show, caused a big stir. I get home, and I'm having conversations with friends in the church, good Christian people, not necessarily this church, but all over. And this theme, we're going to tie together at the end of this presentation. But the theme is, when I broke the law and I went to a sports show to conduct business, did I commit a sin? That's an interesting concept. And the verse that people kept saying was, everyone is subject to the authority that governs them. Well, the law says I can't go to a sports show. And I went. Did I sin? So the question that I have then, that I asked is, when did I sin? We're going to tie this into guns in just a minute. Did I sin when I had intention to go to the show? Did I sin when I pulled out on the highway? Did I sin when I arrived at the sports show? When did it become a sin? And then the question is, when I go to court and I win, is it no longer a sin? I go to court. St. Paul attorney dismisses my ticket. I won. DNR's so mad, they brought me back into court in Ramsey County and took another shot at me. I go into court. We have a judge. Guess which judge it is? The same guy that came to the sports show. He says, both attorneys, you got to realize I have prior knowledge on this case. I have to remove myself from this case. He removes himself. They find a liberal judge. We have a hearing. The liberal judge makes a ruling, and he says, the DNR can do anything and everything that they want to protect our wildlife. My attorney says, you're going to lose. I'm back to sinning. I'm making fun, right? My attorney says, you're going to lose. We're going to take it to the Supreme Court because this ruling says they can do it, Steve. And I said, but I've spoke to the previous judge said I was right, and 8 different sheriffs said I was right, and 8 different senators that I've come to know on a first basis say I'm right. We have constitutional rights. So I told my attorney, I said, I want to plead guilty and I want 90 days in jail. What do you mean you want 90 days? I'm not settling for anything less. I want maximum for trying to run a business. He said, you sure love life. I'm fighting for my farm. He went and told that. He relayed the message. The attorney comes back and says, we're going to dismiss the ticket. I got the same ticket dismissed twice. Why am I telling you this? Because some of these people are bullies, and they will bully you until you stand up to them. Does that make sense? Okay, so now how do we not get bullied in our firearms? We have to know the law. We have to know what's right. We have to know what we can do, what we can't do. Like Gary said, I'm not encouraging anybody to be a political activist, but I heard earlier in this evening, someone said we had constitutional rights. A friend of mine a long time ago, you know what he told me? He said, Steve, you don't have constitutional rights. I said, yes, I do. I fought for those constitutional rights for 30 years. He said, you don't have one. I said, explain it to me. He said, if you don't have a fat enough checkbook to push this all the way to the Supreme Court, you don't have any constitutional rights. Not one. If your pocketbook isn't deep enough, you don't have them. These state agencies are going to do whatever they want to you, and you have to prove it on your dime. That's a fact, okay? So, we're going to keep moving here. Minnesota SF 1723. We're going to go through a bunch of slides. I'm going to go kind of quick, you guys. I spoke to a state representative the other day. He said, and people say, this isn't about politics. I'm here to tell you that this is everything to do with politics. One more thing, an evil heart. But it's politics, okay? In my deer farm fight, 100% of the Republicans, maybe 99%, voted to save my farm and not take it from me. 99% of the Democrats voted to destroy it, take it away, and force me to kill animals and drag them into a pit. They'd vote right down party lines on the issues. What do we see with the gun control bills? We see 100% of the Republicans voting to not steal your gun rights. It's a fact. You can go back and look up the laws and look at the voting records. And 100% of the Democrats have voted for this. This is what they're voting for. I'm standing in a church. I hope I don't offend anybody, but I'm going to tell you what I see happening. If you don't believe me, look it up, okay? All right. So now we're going to go through this kind of quickly. There's the state rep that I spoke to said they're doing a scorched earth policy. Please understand, the Democrats now control the House. The Democrats have the majority in the Senate. The Democrats have the governor, and they got the attorney general. I got to back up for 1 minute. When I asked my senator, when I was fighting for my farm, and I'm still fighting, and the laws are coming, and I'm probably going to get run out of business totally. I'll get the final nail in the coffin. I asked my senator, I said, how do you pass unconstitutional laws? Don't you have a constitutional czar? When you dream up a law that you want to pass, that it would go in front of a constitutional czar, and they would look at it and say, you can't pass this law. It's unconstitutional. He said, Steve, that'd be a great idea. Who would appoint the constitutional czar? Oh, it would be the governor. Which way would he lean? He'd lean left on one year and right the next. Right? So the appointment of a constitutional czar, some of our senators in a previous life were second grade teachers. And they're voting on legal issues. And they were a second grade teacher. How are they equipped to vote on a constitutional issue as a previous qualification of being a second grade teacher? It doesn't make any sense, right? So, they're doing a scorched earth policy, my state rep said. Just like in Desert Storm, that term, they've dropped, I thought he said, I could be wrong here, I thought he said they dropped like 2,000 laws introduced, which might make sense if we look at this one was number 1723, correct? Can they drop 2,000 laws in 3 weeks? They don't even have time to keep up and read them, and they're just smoking through. And they get to a vote, all the Republicans vote one way, all the Democrats vote the other, and it's whistling through. Why? Democrats have the House, the Senate, the governor, and the Attorney General. They have control. So let's look at these gun laws. And like I said, there's all sorts of them. You can look it up. If I talked about all these gun laws, we'd be here for 6 hours. There could be a full day class or two on just these gun laws that are being passed, okay? There's a lot of knowledge and wisdom in this room. It's a chance, if you disagree with me on something, we might have to read the law twice. Do you know why? That's done intentional. They don't want us to read it the first time and know what it means. But we're going to break it down and give you some clarification, okay? So, possession and transfer of firearms, okay? It says to protect life, this is the intent and purpose of the law, to protect life and liberty of Minnesotans from gun violence by people who would deny them these rights, it is necessary to implement a rational regulatory system for firearms similar to Minnesota's long-standing system for licensing drivers and registering motor vehicles. Let's take them at their word there. They want to create a system that's similar to your car. You go in and license it, it has a value. You buy tabs for your car and you prove you have insurance. This is what they just said. I'm not adding to it. They want it similar. Okay? Next slide, please, Dylan. Possession and transfer of firearms. Okay, we can read about that, but I'm going to skim through it, okay? We can read all that. It's boring. There's too many pages here. But here they're telling us their intent and purpose of the legislation, and they're going to be kind enough to tell us, don't read the Constitution on your own. We're going to tell you nothing in this legislation infringes on the constitutional right to keep and bear arms. Everything they're doing is legal. Just take their word for it. What do you guys think? Let's take their word for it. That's their hoping, okay? But they put it in print. Can you believe that? So, the Constitution, we read it, I get a meaning out of it. They read it, they get a totally different meaning of what that means to keep and bear arms, right? They're telling us they're abiding by the book. I don't really think so. Let's keep going. Database of firearm registration and transfers, rules required. The Commissioner of Public Safety shall establish a computerized central reporting system, sounds like motor vehicles again, and maintain a database of firearm registrations and transfers. Okay? They shall establish a computerized reporting system. Sounds like a motor vehicle department, right? And then it says the Commissioner of Public Safety is who they're referring to, shall adopt rules. Do you guys know what that means, adopt rules? Make them up. They're going to pass the law, and then after everybody goes home from the legislative session, the commissioner can just say, hey, and by the way, we're adding 47 parts to this law, and it's a rule that will be enforceable as law with teeth. An in-house rule. Where else do we see in-house rules coming? Department. Where? DNR. They're excellent at making rules to run me out of business. Just pass a rule. That's what I beat them on. When I beat them on the one issue, they still destroyed my farm. They were crooked. They said that the law said that the Commissioner of Natural Resources may control domestic animals that might be spreading disease. Domestic animals I have. Commissioner of Natural Resources can control them that might be, possibly could be spreading disease. Sounds like they have authority. I said, I'll see you in court. They said, the rule's very clear, Steve. I said, you only used the first half of it. You only put the first half of the sentence down. Nobody in law enforcement ever. I've made 100 criminal complaints in my life, or more, for felonies, and when you write a statute out, you have to write the whole statute. You can't do half of it. What was the second half of the statute they left out when they made their rule? It was this. It was the Commissioner of Natural Resources may control domestic animals that may be spreading disease that have been turned loose, set free, or are running at large. They forgot that half. And they wanted everybody to cave in. So I win, but I still lost my entertainment business. I just lost. Okay? So they shall adopt rules. That's not law. Why do they want to adopt rules? The governor gets to appoint the left-leaning or right-leaning. He gets to appoint the commissioner of public safety. He gets to appoint the commissioner of the DNR. He gets to appoint all the commissioners. So when these commissioners are appointed, they're hand-picked to have a similar mindset, to interpret the Constitution the same way. So these people are in control, and now they're appointed, and they get to adopt rules in-house. That's scary. They can bypass the legislative process. Let's keep going. Okay, a person who's applying for a permit to carry a pistol shall. Now, a lot of times when you read the law, you guys, this word shall is very important. You're going to see it a lot of times, and it'll say shall or may. That's a key word. Okay? It says shall obtain and continuously maintain a policy of liability insurance specifically covering any damages resulting from any negligent, or is a big word whenever you read a statute, read that, from any negligent or willful acts. That's interesting. So far you got to register your gun, okay, and you got to have insurance on it. So what they're doing is from the same playbook that they came after me, it's let's increase his expenses through legislation and rules and take away his income. And he won't want to farm. We won't run him out of business. We'll wink, nink, nod, nod. You can keep raising deer. You just can't make any money. We're going to price you out of it. But keep raising them. It'd be fun. They want to increase your cost and take away your desire to own guns. And once this framework is around you and you're boxed in, do you think they'll back off the following year? No, then once you're boxed in, they tighten it every year. They just keep tightening it, right? Okay, keep going here, Dylan. Okay, liability insurance required. A person who intends to own a firearm shall, prior to the ownership of the firearm. If you plan on buying a gun, you must, prior to the ownership of the firearm, obtain and during ownership continuously maintain a policy of liability insurance specifically covering any damages resulting from any negligent or willful acts. Come down here. A person is considered to own a firearm if the firearm is lost or stolen until the loss of theft is reported to the chief of police or sheriff. What does that mean? That means that if you lose a gun or it gets stolen and someone takes it out and they do something bad with it, or accidentally, intentionally or accidentally, you own it forever until you've reported the theft or loss to your local chief of police on that gun. Are you with me? You guys, I can't even believe what I'm telling you. It sounds like an episode of The Twilight Zone. I thought it would be fun tonight, because when I read these laws, you guys, I thought it would have been fun to take a 2-gallon pickle jar and put on the stage and have it as a swear jar. Maybe by my feet. And if you think a swear word while I'm talking, afterwards just come in and drop $5 in. How much money do you think I'd make? I'd need a bigger pail. Right? I'm sorry, you guys, but this is just alarming. It's so alarming we can't even believe it. It brings me to anger. I'm not angry, but I'm upset. Okay, keep going here. Liability insurance required, we talked about that. A person with an existing permit to carry. Any of you got a permit to carry signed by the sheriff? Or who owns a firearm on the effective date of this section shall obtain insurance. That sounds okay. What's the premium? What's the cost? How much? $1 million, $2 million, $5, 100,000? What do we need? Oh, wait a minute. The elected commissioner, left or right, in this case, Walz, shall set a minimum. We're going to pass it, but we don't know what that's going to be. We'll decide that later. Right? Okay, let's keep going. Ownership and possession of firearms, license required. So you're going to need to go in and register it. You're going to need to have insurance on it. And then you're going to need what? License. No person may own or possess a firearm in this state unless the person has a valid current license issued by the commissioner appointed of public safety under this section. So you're going to need a license. Go ahead. All. Yep. If it has powder and goes bang, you need a license. Okay? Keep going, Dylan. Ownership and possession of firearms, license required. We're going to skip through. You can read that. You can look it up later. But it says a background check with certificate issued within the past 30 days by the chief of police of the municipality in which the person resides, or if there is no chief of police, by the sheriff of the county. Why did I highlight that? Because it's real interesting. I've got Kenny Halkren here in the crowd. Kenny, where are you? Right here. How many permits to carry did you as sheriff issue?
Oh God, I couldn't count them all.
500?
Yeah.
1,000? How long did it take you to issue a permit to carry?
A couple days, maybe.
You do a background check, look at them,
Yep.
be quick.
Yep. Run them through NCIC. And
What happens if you denied somebody the right to have a permit to carry? Do you remember?
I better have a reason, because if I don't have a reason that I can prove, I can be sued by the individual. We go to court. As the sheriff, I would lose the case because I can't prove a reason for him not to be issued a permit.
Right.
And when the hearing is done and the judge has ruled in that guy's favor, now I'm stuck with that guy's attorney's fees.
Okay, so for our viewing audience, Kenny just said it was a pretty streamlined case. He approved 100% of them, I think, and if you didn't, you were liable. They had to have a really big violation. And the sheriffs, typically, like myself and Kenny, we would hold to the Constitution. They come in, if they weren't locked up in a psych ward and they haven't committed these wrong crimes or they didn't meet the requirements, they're on the fast track to getting a permit. You got me? So look what they did here now in this law here. Anytime you read the law, you guys, I should have said this earlier, if it's underlined like this, you know what that means when it's underlined? That means it's brand new language being added to an existing law. Everything underlined is brand new. Anything that's crossed out with a line through it, that means they're taking that word out. So you can look at this and see how the law is morphing, correct? So look what they did here. Now this is brand new law, but it still comes into play. It's always been you go to your sheriff, and your sheriff gives you a permit to carry. But they can't control the sheriffs as easily as they like. Who do they want you to go to? By the chief of police of the municipality in which the person resides. Or, if there is no chief of police, then you can go to the sheriff. So if they pass that law, you know how many permits are going to be issued by chief of police? About 75% of the people live in cities with police departments. Or higher. I'm guessing, you guys, correct me. That means they're taking the authority away from the sheriff and they're handing it to the chief of police, and they're doing it intentionally. Why? Because your chief of police, he doesn't answer to the voters. He answers to a board of commissioners. And the state can impose restrictions on a city, money, funding, this, that, the other thing, political pressure. City council says, oh, we got to cave in. Chief of police, step in line and quit issuing permits as freely as the sheriffs were. That's my opinion. You guys can argue with me. Kenny, you think I'm right?
You are right on.
Okay. Keep going here. Yep.
Talking about offering people that commit suicide with firearms, she said she wants them to go to the place, and if they ever wanted to get a firearm, and admit that they might be mentally ill. So if they come in, they never get a chance to buy a gun. Now I know working in the medical field for a while, you cannot accept anybody to come in. You can't ask them, hey, what kind of medical issues you got? Because you're violating their rights. They don't have to. I don't know how she could think about doing that.
Right. So the question is, they wanted people to admit to medical health history, which is data privacy, and then they wanted to use that data privacy information against them, preventing them from having a gun.
Do that as a felon. Am I right on that?
Yeah. No. Right. No, you're correct. So again, I read the Constitution. Somebody else reads it. It's a totally different thing. Okay. But you're right, there is data privacy and HIPAA and all this other stuff. It's what they want it to read. Okay? Yep.
I think what you're referring to is that red flag law that some states are contemplating. I don't know, have we gone there, Steve?
Not yet.
Okay.
Right. No, we're going there. We're going there. Yeah, we're going there. I haven't got there, and I don't know if I chose to talk about that slide. There's so many slides, you guys. I could have been here for 2 days. Okay, so it says ownership and possession of firearms, license required, a firearms safety certificate accepted by the Department of Public Safety. Well, that's an interesting sentence. So, ownership and possession of firearms, license required. You need a license. And the Commissioner of Public Safety is going to accept the firearms safety certificate that shows proof of ability to safely own. What would that proof be? Ability to safely own, store, transport, and use a firearm. So the Department of Public Safety, after this passes, is going to say, well, we're going to accept, and these are the requirements. Here's all the requirements that we've come up, and it'll be more than a page. But they have to have a firearms safety certificate. Do you guys know where do you get a firearms safety certificate? Oh, and so the DNR. Oh, the DNR is going to give us a firearm safety certificate to own a rifle or a pistol as an adult. Do you think it'd be any other agency, Tim? It can't be. Okay, so let's keep going because I got more proof to this point. But it has to be accepted, and I'm saying, who does it right now? It's the Minnesota DNR. Who was I fighting? I was fighting the DNR. Let's keep that theme going here because it screams at you in a bit here. You have to prove that you can safely own, store, transport, and use a firearm. There's your insurance again. The commissioner may charge the applicant a reasonable fee to cover the cost of the licensing process. How much is it? Nobody knows. But they're assuring us it's going to be reasonable. Okay? Right? Increase the cost. Take away your freedoms. Squeeze, squeeze, squeeze until you desire not to own a firearm. There will be nobody going door to door. If these laws pass, it's just to take away your desire. So if we paint this picture real quick, if you got 15 guns in your house, let's say each one of them costs you $50 the first year, and then you got to get a license for $200-300, and then you got to do this. Pretty soon, I owe $1,500 to keep 15 guns. But the next year, we decided we didn't make enough money, and we had some shootings, and the insurance companies had to sue some people. So the insurance companies are raising the rates. Instead of $50 a gun, now it's going to be $300 a gun. So now you owe $4,500 a year to keep your guns. The insurance companies will be suing once they're insured. They're going to pay out. They're going to sue. The insurance companies will be raising rates. And the insurance companies can deny anybody for any reason. And then it's no longer constitutional. Okay, so here we go, next slide. Penalties. A person who fails to carry a license. So if you have a license, you went through all the trouble, you went to the DNR, you talked nice to the game warden, and he passed you in a class. The Commissioner of Public Safety recognizes it, you paid your fee, you got your license to carry your gun. Guess what? If you are out and you have your gun and you forgot your license at home, it's just a petty misdemeanor. Petty misdemeanor means there's no jail time, $185 fine, I'm guessing. Petty misdemeanor, not a big deal. I didn't have my license on me. However, a person who does either of the following is guilty of a misdemeanor. A misdemeanor is guilty up to 90 days in jail. So if you did any of the following, if you own a firearm without having it registered, but you have a license, but you own a firearm and you just didn't register that one, you're going to be guilty of a misdemeanor, up to 90 days in jail and maybe probably a $700, $800, $900 fine. Okay? Or, number 2, owns or possesses a firearm after a license issued under this section has expired. Well, then you've committed another misdemeanor. A person who does any of the following is guilty of a gross misdemeanor. That's punishable up to a year in jail. A year. I got that jar here for some of you guys if you want to. Don't forget. Okay? Okay. So, owns or possesses a firearm after a license is issued under this section has expired. You let it expire, you've committed a gross misdemeanor. Right there. Okay? Okay, let me go back. I got to go down. A person who does any of the following is guilty of a gross misdemeanor, owns or possesses a firearm, correct, thanks for correcting me, down here, without having first obtained a license under this section, or owns or possesses a firearm after a license issued under this section has become invalid, except through expiration. So what does that mean here? If you own or possess a firearm after a license was issued, you got your license, issued under this section has become invalid. How do you get an invalid license? If you get caught later on, we're going to talk about storage of a firearm. And so if you have your firearm not locked in a box, approved, and your ammunition not locked and boxed and approved, or they're stored together, and you get caught having them improperly stored, you lose your rights to possess a firearm for 3 years. That slide's coming up. So once you've lost your license, it's become invalid, and now you have one, then it's up to a gross misdemeanor. Okay? No. There is a law in the books for your driver's license that you do have to carry your driver's license, but in the beginning paragraph, they want to model something similar to a motor vehicle. You're going to need a license to have your firearm and to purchase and to possess and carry with you at all times. And they're saying a license. I'm assuming, I'm taking them at their word, that it's going to be a gun owner license, that you've met the requirements to have a gun.
They'll allow me about 3 days to show them that I have proof of insurance if I can't find it in my car. Aren't they going to give me a few days to get a license, so to speak?
So there's going to be a time that this law would be implemented, and on the bottom of each section it says it would be implemented, maybe on January 1st of 24. Well, there you go, right? But we're going to talk about that in a bit here, okay? Good point. So let's keep. What was that? We've got our first money in church here. Here we go. Okay. All right. So we're having fun. We're keeping it informal. I can't believe what we're talking about. It's natural to have anger, you guys. It's natural to have that in your head right now, to be angry. And we're going to talk about what the right response is when we get done, okay? Okay, so let's keep going. Penalties, we just covered this, Dylan. Let's go again. Makes a false statement, The court shall notify the commissioner when a person is convicted of a violation under this section. Okay, so again, you had your gun stored wrong, you didn't have a license, you didn't have insurance, you were convicted of a violation under this section, you violated one of those rules, the commissioner shall revoke or deny issuance of the person's license to possess for a period of 3 years for a misdemeanor and 10 years for a gross misdemeanor violation under this section. So if you get caught improperly doing any of the above, those are the penalties. Right? What do you think of that? They mostly would take your guns, or like in other aspects of law enforcement that I've seen, and there's other officers in the room, if a person can't possess guns, let's say a person was suicidal or he was habitually drinking, and you're running through detox, and the judge orders, hey, I'm worried about you, I don't want your guns in your home, and the judge temporarily suspends a person's right to have guns, the judge will say, you need to bring him in and turn him into the sheriff, or how about you turn him into your brother? And then I'd go out and talk to the brother and say, hey, get the guns out of his house, you keep them, don't let him have them back, and it would suffice. But I don't think it's going to be that way. But I don't know for sure. Okay, keep going here. Firearm transfers requirements. So what would be a transfer? Let's look at that up. This is the definition section. here, and it's talking about the definitions of what exactly is a transfer of a firearm. That's what we're looking at, okay? And so here's number 1, number 2. I didn't care to talk about them. Number 3 would be a loan between persons lawfully engaged in hunting or target shooting if the loan of the firearm is intended for a period of no more than 30 days. So if I go out hunting with one of you guys, your gun acts up, it breaks, it misfires, and I say, here, do you want to use my gun? I can't do that because I can't loan it to you. There's requirements. Loaning a firearm would be a violation that would get you suspended for 3 years. No loaning guns, you guys. Okay, keep going. Firearm transfer requirements. This is just so I can keep it in sequence, but keep going. And a loan between peace officers, a loan between, I can't even talk, employees, or between employer and employee of a business if they're required to carry a firearm. So it's giving you some cop exemptions and stuff like that. Keep going, Dylan. Firearm transfer requirements. Now we know the definition and who's required and who's not. It says at the time of a delivery of a firearm, okay, or the loan of a firearm under clauses 2, 4, 6, and 7, the transferor and the transferee each shall retain a document signed by both parties. I'm out in the woods, your firing pin acts up, hey, do you want to use one of my rifles? We got to have a document pulled out, we got to sign it, we got to keep it clear, and then we both shall retain the copy. The document shall contain the names of the license, not the driver's license numbers of the transferee and both people. It must have the serial number, firearm or fire of each of all the firearms and the dates, everything. Okay, the commissioner shall develop and provide a standardized form for temporary transfers. Does that sound pretty complicated to you guys? Okay, keep going. Yep, firearm transfers requirements, firearm license. You must have a license that we talked about earlier. No person may transfer a firearm to another unless the transferee presents a valid current firearm license to own and possess the firearm. Okay, one more. Every person who agrees to transfer a firearm shall report the following information in writing to the Commissioner of Public Safety within 3 days of transfer. You're out in the woods hunting, you got 3 days to notify the state that you loaned a gun to someone. And that means they're going to come back and look at it. And if they don't do it right, if they don't have insurance, if it's wrong, you're in violation, you're going to get fined.
Well, that goes back to like you were talking about when you are being told that you can't have a gun because they don't think you're capable.
Yep.
But give it to your brother.
Right.
Well, if he doesn't have a license or anything like that.
You can't give it to him.
Nope.
Right. Yeah, you can't give it to someone who doesn't have a license. Yep, that's correct.
And if you do, and he does, and they figure that this is done wrong, they can take and confiscate all the weapons and possibly in prison. Yeah, I hate to use the word prison,
But it's stacking up, isn't it? It's sure stacking up. It absolutely is. So the name and address of the transferee and all this other stuff, they're making it pretty complicated for you to do it correctly. Okay? Keep going.
Just another question. Say they go through and do all this, do you think they'll start on knives?
Well, the question was for the viewing audience is if they go through and do all this, do you think they'll start on knives? So I Googled some statistics, and I wanted to know what was the number one weapon of choice globally for homicide. And I don't remember what year it was. It might have been like 3-4 years ago. The number one weapon of choice for, I think it accounted to 97,000 homicides, edged weapons. The number one weapon in homicides is edged weapons. It's not even firearms. Okay. Okay, so next one here, Dylan. Or did I do this one or not? At the time of the transfer? Yeah, so at the time of the transfer, the transferor shall give the transferee a temporary registration card. The temporary registration card shall contain all the following information. Again, more complicated, more ways to get in trouble, more way to get a fine. Keep going. Firearm transfer requirements, we're still in that section. It says again, the commissioner may charge the transferee a reasonable fee to cover the cost of the registration process. So why would they put that on there, okay? So if you transferred a firearm to your buddy in the field, okay? These guys are smart. Now, how did they come up with these laws? You guys, this is what I believe. I believe that the governors in the state that are solid Democrat states, I think they went to a conference in Washington. And I think they came back with a packet. They didn't type this up in Minnesota. Jamie Becker Finn's not bright enough. I'm sorry. These people aren't bright enough to type this up. This is language, you guys, from Washington. And they came back and said, here's your blueprint. Go impose it. So, they're worried. These people have thought about it for a long time. So you know how this would go? If they don't put this fee on there, they say we're not putting the fee on there, I kind of know what would happen. Kenny, I'm going to borrow you a gun today. And then, Kenny, you borrow one to Brody. Brody, you borrow one to your father, Todd. We're all doing paperwork every day, all day long, just to overwhelm them. And they said, we don't like that idea, so let's charge them a fee every time. And we can change this fee. If they get silly, we'll just add on a $100 fee and we'll bankrupt them. So we can't overwhelm them with paperwork because they can just increase the fee. Does that make sense? Right. They can change the rules in-house anytime they want. Okay, so keep going. Firearm transfers, requirements, keep going. And I just kept this on there because it was in the same section, but I thought we might draw on this, but we don't need to. Keep going. Okay, so what did I think was important here? It says, except as otherwise provided in paragraph B, a person who transfers a firearm to another in violation of this section is guilty of a gross misdemeanor. A person who does any of the following is guilty of a felony. That's a year or more in jail. So a year or more in jail, transfers a firearm to a person who the lender knows is ineligible to possess the weapon. So if you knew they didn't have a license, but that's not quite right, because then they added this language: if the transferee possesses or uses the weapon within 1 year after the transfer in furtherance of a crime of violence. So if you transferred to someone, you knew they shouldn't have it, then they would have to use it in a crime of violence. And if they used it in a crime of violence at that point, up to a year later, that gun got used in a crime of violence and you gave it to them without insurance or without a license, whatever, you've committed a felony. Does that make sense? Did I explain that okay? Okay, so the if was a big one. You got to keep going there, right? Okay, keep going. And again, firearm registration is required. We talked about that, but they just keep blasting it in there. Every person, every person who owns a firearm must register the firearm with the Commissioner of Public Safety. So that must be, registration must be in writing and contain the number of license of the license. You're going to have an ID on there authorizing the owner to own and possess a firearm. We talked about that. Keep going. But it gets redundant in there. Must have the serial number. Again. And this is kind of what he was talking about a little bit with mental health. But I want to point out that it says all data pertaining to registrations under this section are classified as private data. You go in and get a license, it's private, right? Oh, that's good. My deer farm is private information too. It's not online. You can't see where I live. I advertise. I tell people where they can come hunt on my farm. But there's a law in the books this year that says they want the location of all the deer farms to no longer be private data. So this is just the tightening of the box, you guys. Next year, the year after, all data pertaining to registration of other sections are classified as private data. They just changed it. They say now it's public data. Right? They can just change it. And
It is already, because if I'm going to borrow you a gun, you got to have my license number and all that written on the transfer paper.
right. So what they're saying here is the public data is you couldn't do a data request and find out that Timmy borrowed Steve a gun. But once they change it, then a newspaper could gather and say, look at this guy up in Lake Brunson borrowed out 7 guns. And then it would become public. Anybody can get the information, correct? Okay, keep going. Here again it says the chief of police. Do you see how it's underlined? That's new language. So this is all old law here. And what they did is they added new wording here. They want to handicap your local sheriff. And they added the chief of police or the sheriff. But it used to say that the sheriff must. That was pretty straightforward. The sheriff must is underneath granting and denial of permits. The sheriff must. Now it says the chief of police or the sheriff must do all this stuff. And then it says, if you deny the applicant for a permit to carry solely on the grounds that the applicant failed to qualify, what did they strike out? Under the criteria described in subdivision 2, paragraph B. They're just making it easier to deny permits, and they want a guy who has to answer not to the voters. They want a guy like a chief of police who answers to commissioners, who can be leaned on a lot heavier than a sheriff. Okay? Keep going. Granting a denial of, what did they do here? Failure of the sheriff to notify the applicant of the denial application within 30 days. The sheriff, you're going to get sued, and you have to do this, that, and the other thing. Strike all that out. Let's just go with the chief of police or sheriff must inform the applicant of the applicant's rights to submit within 20 days. We're just going to leave, we're getting rid of all this tight stuff here. Keep going. Here we go again. They changed must to may. That's a pretty big difference, isn't it? Upon receiving any additional documentation, the chief of police, again, or sheriff, no must, he may consider the denial. He may consider the denial. That's all it says. And then they took off the rest of it. That's pretty ambiguous, isn't it? The sheriff may consider the denial. He doesn't have to. He could if he wants to. The chief of police might if they want to. But here they had the sheriff boxed in. You will do this, or you're probably going to end up in court and get sued. Right? So they're making denial of permits a lot easier. Keep going. Yeah, we'll skip over this, but again, you can look it up. Granting and denial of permits. This was good. I got a lot of highlighting on there. Notwithstanding paragraphs A and B, the chief of police, new language, or sheriff may suspend the application process if a charge is pending against the applicant. You guys, a lot of you, if I would have had a show of hands and I would have said, who thinks we have a constitution? You would have said, I think we got a constitution. And then there's court terms, and those court terms are that you're innocent until proven guilty, correct? Is that correct? Are you innocent until proven guilty? You can't take your rights away until you're proven guilty, right? Look what they're doing here. The sheriff or police chief may suspend the rights, the application process to possess a firearm, if there's a charge pending. If you got charged with something, we'll just suspend it. You don't have to be convicted. We're just going to not give you it. That if resulting in conviction will prohibit the applicant from possessing a firearm. You can think one way or the other on that. You're all adults. You know which way you can think on that. In my mind, I always thought we were innocent until proven guilty. I just thought we were. And I thought the Constitution gave us, they'd rather see 10 criminals get away with it than one innocent man ever be falsely accused. That's why we have these rights, correct? But here we're going to punish you on a pending charge. And I'm not so sure about that. Keep going. I want to talk to you about the Board of Animal Health laws. Remember we talked about commissioners being appointed? They can be political activists. So I'm just sharing this with you because this one was important to my struggle. So the law before was the Board of Animal Health. Who do they oversee? Sheep, pig, turkey, cows. If you grow cows near Newfold in Minnesota, there's a board in the cities making decisions for you on how you raise pigs, cows, and chickens and whatever, okay? Board of Animal Health had a 6-person board. We're going to move it to 11. And it says members appointed by the governor, left or right-leaning, with advice and consent. They crouched all that out. It used to be that 4 of the producers of livestock in the state, and at least 1 of the 4 livestock producers is also a member of a federally recognized tribe. But then it talked about the way it was, 4 of the board members had to be actively in farming beef, 1 actively in pigs, 1 actively in turkeys. You had to be actively producing livestock to sit on the board. Are you with me? Okay. And who do you think should be on the board? A guy that understands the rumen, a guy who understands antibiotic and shots and trimming hooves and banding and everything, right? They should be on the board making decisions. So we're going to weaponize this board, and we're going to make it a political action board. So now the language is we're going to have 2 at-large members, 1 member who is a member of a federally recognized tribe. He doesn't have to That person doesn't have to have animals the way it reads. And 8 regional members with no 2 regional members residing in the same congressional district, da-da-da-da. But let's keep going here. Who do these people got to be of the 11 now? Keep going. It says members must be knowledgeable in animal agriculture. I'm for that. Okay, that sounds good, right? But remember I said and or may or shall are all important words. They're key words. So it says members must be knowledgeable in animal agriculture, animal health. Oh, it says or. Or. So no longer do they have to be knowledgeable in animal agriculture, or they could be knowledgeable in pets and companion animals. What this means is if you're, let's say, a 60-year-old woman living in a high-rise apartment and you've got a cat, you have authority to be on the board and make decisions on how cows are raised in Newfoundland. Okay? Or pets and companion, with at least 2 members who will represent the public, no agricultural experience. Oh, we got an and, are not employed in agriculture. So they're weaponizing it. Okay? Totally. And it says the Commissioner of Agriculture, and it says something about natural resources, I've heard that word, and health, Dean of College, and the Director of Veterinary Diagnostic Lab at the University of took out may, shall serve as consultants to the board. So we got consultants who get to sit in front of the woman who lives in a high-rise with a cat. There's going to be people telling her what's important to vote on cows, pigs, turkeys, and sheep. Guess what? Who's going to be the consultant? The Commissioner of Agriculture and the Commissioner of Natural Resources. The Commissioner of Natural Resources will have say to educate the people before they vote on livestock practices in Minnesota. Okay, keep going. Okay, we're back here again. Do we have constitutional rights?
If you got deep pockets.
The only way we have constitutional rights, if you got big enough pockets to take it all the way to the Supreme Court. And that sounds crude, you guys. It sounds like that's no way. That's a fact. And I can tell you, I fought for 4 to 5 years fighting for the life of my farm. I'd go online. I do rants. People see some of my stuff, and they're like, hey, keep it up. I get 100 phone calls a week sometimes. Maybe not quite. People are like, yes, you got to stand up for the DNR. Stand up, you can't do it. We got constitutional rights. Some people look at my rants online, and they're like, oh, it's just Steve. He's fighting for his deer farm. It doesn't make sense. Well, the deer farm's not a big deal, you guys, to anybody. Guns are a big deal. You're fighting the exact same people that I've been fighting for 4 and 5 years. You're fighting the exact same people. Okay? Look at here. I'm going to ask this question again. Did I commit a sin by attending a sports show with my live buck display? I'm going to beat this to death. Why? Because I'm a Christian man. I don't want to sin. I'm not saying we should sin. I'm not trying to get the church today to say, take down your walls, anything goes, anybody can preach from the pulpit, we endorse everything, let's just get rid of sin. I'm not saying that. What am I saying? I'm saying that we have to consider some things very seriously. I knew in my heart, me going to a sports show, I'm breaking the law. I am breaking the law. And I had people telling me, yep, you're committing a sin. The Bible says everyone is subject to the authority that governs them. Well, I have a question. And you have to come to a determination on this on your own when it comes to guns. I want you to marry these two together and think about it, okay? Moses, somebody better Bible-based than me could explain this better, but I believe he was put in a wicker basket and floated down the river. I believe there was a decree that went out into the land. And the decree was something about these baby boys being killed, and she violated the law of Pharaoh. And she said, I'm not turning my baby in. I'm not doing it. And she put her baby in the wicker basket, and he floated down, and that was Moses. Pretty important guy, right? The Bible says we shall not lie. Have I ever told a lie? I have. You know how many sex offenders I arrested by telling them a lie? I knew I was going to lie to them. We're in a room here. I would have a sex offender who hurt somebody, and they were 15 years old, and they wouldn't admit to nothing. You know what I'd say? You don't have to admit to anything, but we got a problem. What? She's pregnant. She wasn't pregnant. I end up on the witness stand. The attorney says, you lied to my client. No, I bluffed. You lied. No, I bluffed. You lied. You say tomato, I say tomato. Minnesota statute says I have a right to bluff with the defendant. It gives me authority. It says that I can, in fact, do that. The Bible says that I can't lie. Is there anybody else that we know in history that's lied? Is it Carrie ten Boom? Some Germans came to her door and asked if she had any Jews hidden in her attic. What did she tell them? She said, no, I don't. Did she lie? I'm opening up a can of worms here, but I'm doing it on purpose. I didn't sin by going to a sports show. And it doesn't matter what the judge says. I had judges all over the place on this issue. I happen to win. So when you leave tonight and you're going to ask these questions, if these laws pass, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? I know what I'm going to do. They're unconstitutional.
I'm gonna fight him.
Right. We're going to fight them. I'm not a violent guy. I can't ever be violent. All I have is my right to free speech. That's all I have is my right to free speech. I'm exercising that online every day. The DNR passed a law against me. They're unconstitutional, you say, and you're right. The DNR passed a law that says that a game warden can come onto my farm anytime he wants and do an inspection of my deer. My deer are not wild animals. My deer under Minnesota statute 17.425, I think is the number, look it up, I'm close, 17425, says that deer raised on my farm are agriculture, and all of their byproducts are agriculture. They're livestock. So I asked a sheriff last weekend, I said, do you think it's unconstitutional for a game warden to come on my farm? Well, 8 sheriffs prior to this told me it's unconstitutional. The game wardens can't come on your land. They need, according to the Constitution, they need consent or a search warrant. Period. End of story. To come on my land. I've been screaming, fighting, kicking. You're not coming on my land. I haven't had a game warden yet in 2 years, but they've gone on all the other deer farms and raised heck up one side, down the other. Why am I saying a game warden can't come on my farm? Because I have constitutional rights. As soon as you put a gun on your hip, you put a badge on your chest, and you have powers of arrest, you are bound to rules of criminal procedure. And those rules are, you must protect the Constitution. They have a right to remain silent. They have a right to have an attorney. They have the right to deny consent. Are you with me? So, I asked this sheriff, can a game warden come on my farm? Eight sheriffs prior to this and me say no. But this sheriff says, well, I think it's a licensed activity. I think they got it in there, Steve. I said, well, you're wrong. He's a sheriff. He says, I think it's okay because it's a licensed activity. You guys want me to back up and show you where they're asking you to get a license here? I can do that. So as soon as we're licensed to have guns, is that going to be the attitude of people, that they have a right to come on our property? Because that's what they're imposing on me. Does that make sense? The Constitution? I have constitutional rights, but nobody listens. Well, sue them. I don't have the money. They'll bankrupt me. I sue them on my dime, and they have unlimited resources.
Our governor breaks the Constitution all the time. As soon as they go to gun control.
Right, our governor,
They're breaking the Constitution of the United States, and they ought to be kicked out of office.
so the comment for the viewing office listeners is that our governor is breaking the Constitution. He should be kicked out of office. I totally agree. But they're telling us it's Constitution, and the attitude of the state agencies are, and it's 3-letter agencies all the time. Pick out a 3-letter state agency, and it's their attitude all the time. Okay? Right? EPA, DNR. If it's 3 letters, I'll tell you what. Let me tell you what the solution was. The solution was, you guys, last summer, I spent a big part of my summer campaigning for Scott Jensen. Because I was in a fight to save my farm. The Constitution matters. And I've been fighting for my farm. And I went and I had a fundraiser for Scott Jensen. We raised, I think it was a whopping $17,000. I went door to door in Bemidji for 2 days. trying to get people in Bemidji to get woke up. We got to do something. Jim Schultz, Attorney General. I had a meeting with Scott in the room. Some of you were there. And Scott comes in and he says, Steve, when do you want me to talk? I said, you're not talking, you're listening today. He says, okay. He sits down, pulls out a notebook. We had 30 farmers in the room. And every farmer went around the room and talked about how the DNR is attacking a guy from growing corn, how they're extorting money over wetlands, how they're doing this, that, and the other thing. We went around the room. We get done, and Scott says to me, he says, very good meeting, Steve, for about an hour. What's the solution? I said, I have a solution for you. Here's the solution. And I'm saying this outside of a biblical view now, okay? Because the biblical view would be different. Sin is the root of everything. But beyond that, the solution in my mind is real simple. We have an overzealous agency in a sheriff's department. A first-year deputy, iron sharpens iron. And a first-year deputy ends up on the witness stand. He gets grilled by an attorney who gets paid $80,000 to represent the client. And the deputy sits there and he looks stupid and he's foolish and he made mistakes. At the end of the hearing, he's a bit sharper. His next hearing, he's a bit sharper. The deputy answers to a sheriff who was elected by the people. And so all of a sudden, what do we got with the DNR? We don't have one elected official from the guy on the bottom all the way to the top, not one elected official. And as soon as we get a far left-leaning governor, he can weaponize the entire agency. They have to follow orders. And so Jim Schultz is sitting there, and Jim and I had talked about it, and I said, Jim, here's what we need to do. Minneapolis-St. Paul is 500 officers short right now. They're having carjackings every day. They're having officers walk out of law enforcement daily. And the DNR doesn't have enough to do. I said, what we need to do is, can you write a law as Attorney General that says all the game wardens would be handed over to the sheriff immediately, effective immediately. They'd put on a conservation deputy shirt. They'd investigate sex crimes, meth labs, burglaries, and someone feeding deer corn out of a bird feeder in their backyard. He said I could do that. And we'd work on real crime, and instantly, all these officers who are highly trained and very good would be working on real crime, and the sheriff would still be answering the game calls. But instantly, we'd have an elected officer over overzealous officers, and you could walk right into his officer and deal with it. You say we have constitutional rights? Why did I tell you this long story? Because the sheriffs, 47 of them, have stood up and written letters, my last count. 47 sheriffs have said, this is unconstitutional, and I won't be enforcing it. Well, the sheriff I was talking to, he publicly stated, I will not be enforcing, and neither will my guys, any of these extreme gun laws. Now, there might be some I have to enforce, but the majority of these I won't be enforcing them. And I went and talked to the sheriff afterwards. And I said, well, I called up Rick Hodgson with the Sheriff's Association, the attorney, and I asked him specifically, I don't want to investigate wolf kills on cows. I don't want to do it. Our cattle farmers are getting killed up here. He goes, Steve, what do you want? I said, I want to publicly announce that I'm not investigating any wolf kills. I'm not prosecuting anybody for a wolf killing a cow. He goes, Steve, you can't do that. This is a very bright guy. One of the brightest legal minds that I know. I said, why can't I? He said, sheriffs have been removed from office. They took an oath to uphold the laws that are passed. The sheriff shall, remember the words? I think it says, shall investigate all felonies, gross misdemeanors, and misdemeanors. I think that's what it says. So the sheriffs are bound. They have to enforce the laws. They're not the lawmakers. So 47 sheriffs have stood up and said, I'm not enforcing those laws. But not that boldly. They said, we're opposed. I heard one say, we won't enforce it. Well, if these pass, I suspect that all the 47 that said we're opposed, there won't be 47 saying I won't enforce them. Because you can't make that bold statement. You were hired to enforce the law. Rick Hodgson told me sheriffs have been removed from office for saying they weren't enforced certain laws. So that's legal turf. That's going to be a battle on what authority, what can they do. Yep.
Or for not enforcing?
Well, I think it was one and the same. I think, and I don't know the example, it's just what Rick told me on the phone. Good question, was it for saying it or actually not enforcing it? And I don't know what the law was, I wish I knew, but I don't. Yep, Kenny?
They would have to physically not enforce the law.
Physically not enforce the law.
They can say, I'm not going to enforce it all they want.
But then by exercising that and not doing it would be, you think, grounds for justification for removal.
Right.
Okay. So that was a good question, both you guys.
Would the governor
Governor. Governor and a coroner are the only two that can remove a sheriff.
So that's an interesting battleground. How much authority do our sheriffs have to say we're not doing that? So then who's going to enforce these laws, you guys? Who's going to enforce it? You know who's going to do it? It's going to be the appointed. The commissioners that are appointed of the three-letter state agencies in law enforcement would be what? It would be, I think, Minnesota DNR. They're not going door to door. They're not knocking on your door. If these laws pass, they've made it so far. If is a big word. But they're not going to say, let's storm swoop the state and do enforcement. It would be subtle. It would be, oh, we got a guy on the side of the road. He's 65 years old. He's hunting. How's deer hunting? Good. Do you have your license to possess that firearm? No, you don't. Okay, well, you're going to jail. And if you arrested 25 guys in the state of Minnesota and it splashed into the newspaper, then they would come out and say, well, we don't like arresting people, but you got to comply, everybody. So if you don't want the guns, just turn them in. And it would heat up over a 1 or 2 or 3 year period. I don't think they're going door to door, but there would be people getting tickets on the side of the road. The sheriff could probably tell his deputies, just stay away from it. Run from it. Any chance you can, run. But again, only 47 sheriffs last count stood up out of 87. Only 47 said they're opposed. And so the state agency, the DNR, I'm sure they have patriots on their staff just like everywhere else. But when your boss tells you you will enforce these, they're in a pickle.
Yeah, the papers would tell the truth.
Yeah, the papers would tell the truth, he says. Yeah, I think I got your point. What's your question back?
Was it 2018 they passed what's called the Second Amendment for sanctuary counties?
Yeah, so
How does that play into something like this pass for the counties that didn't pass?
okay, and there's people in the room that might have more knowledge on me than this. I'm going to tell you what I think it means. The question is Second Amendment cities and what impact does that have on these laws coming out? And so what I believe it is, the Second Amendment city, and again, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, it's a pledge from the county saying, county or city, we're not spending any of our tax dollars enforcing these laws. So if you're Roseau, Marshall, Pennington, not Kitson County said, no, we don't want to be a Second Amendment sanctuary. The other three said yes, up here in this corner. It means that we will not spend any money on the enforcement of these laws, which means the county attorney draws his salary. There'd be no money allocated to the county attorney to prosecute these charges. The sheriff's jail would have no funding available to jail these people that are arrested on constitutional violations, okay? So it's just saying we're not spending our tax dollars on the enforcement of these laws. What does that mean? There's a law in the books, I didn't bring it with, that you heard of Keith Ellison enforcing laws against restaurant owners in COVID for not shutting down, arresting mom and a daughter from making a living. Many examples of that. So if the county wouldn't charge it, Keith Ellison was happy to step up to the plate and do it on the state level. So when the counties say we're Second Amendment, that's fine, but I think they've got a law, I could look, where Keith Ellison has promised to step in and lend a helping hand. And then where would they be hauled? They'd be hauled to a county that will help out.
Well, it'd be like the trespass law. If you fight it, you'd have to go to the cities to fight it.
Yeah, so Kenny's referring to a trespass law, and again, there's 3 trespass laws. There's 609, there's civil, and there's 97B. But under the civil trespass law, those are in the cities. And the 97B, all the state DNR statutes are enforced through the county attorney in the county. But if he said, no, I'm not doing it, then the DNR would just simply find another county attorney. They'd have a Zoom hearing, and they'd just have somebody appear in a Zoom hearing from, Hennepin County in front of a judge from Hennepin.
So that's pretty much going to take out the out-of-state hunting? People coming in from out of state down here? Pretty much.
The question is, what will this do to out-of-state hunting? I don't know. It's interesting to me. I I think I saw something about reciprocity in one of the laws where if you had reciprocity to carry in another state, it would wipe out all reciprocity. It's not valid in Minnesota. So in order to come into Minnesota, you'd have to apply for a license and insurance and registration and do all that stuff.
So all these people don't come into Minnesota, and Minnesota loses a lot of money.
Right.
And eventually, that will be gone.
Right.
So Steve, politicians love money.
Right.
Is there conflict about these proposed rules because of the loss of revenue and stuff?
In my opinion, the question is there a conflict because of the loss of revenue? If you've been reading the paper, you guys, they just shut down a huge OSB factory over in International Falls. They didn't give them paperwork fast enough. What was the name of the company? Huge. It was a huge business. They didn't care about the lost revenue. We got rules, regulations. You're not opening up business in Minnesota because you could impact our climate. There was a soybean plant over by Crookston. Same thing. It was going to offer jobs and revenue and tax. It got bound up in paperwork. They went over to Grand Forks. Grand Forks said, we'll give you land. We'll put you on the fast track. I think they gave them land. I mean, they just opened the door and said, we'll take your business. You know, a great big factory? Sure we will. There's businesses fleeing the state of Minnesota. Fleeing because of the rules and the red tape.
Same thing's happening for years in California because of the government. Now, this governor follows Newsom what he does in California.
Right.
So the same thing's happening here. When this guy is ever voted out of office.
Yeah, I don't want to be all gloom and doom, but he says, you know, the guy speaking here said that, you know, Minnesota and California are following the same page model of how to get things.
This guy did.
And I agree wholeheartedly, but I don't think Minnesota politics, I don't know. But again, if we look, Dylan, I asked you to take the last slide off. Is it totally gone, or is it something you can put back up there? So go back to the first slide. I didn't know if I wanted to go here, but I'm going to go here now because we're talking about it, okay? So there it is, right there. What do you think of that slide right there? I wasn't going to go here. I had it. I wrestled with it. I just didn't know. Gun laws, worldview.
Yeah, 10% of an iceberg is above water, 90% is below. Which means all the dirty shit that's going to be going on, excuse my language, is going to be under surface.
Right, but if I look at this, and I say gun law is biblical worldview, you guys, and we're in a church, and I'll give you my honest opinion. This is a big deal, these gun laws. It's a big deal if your state is going to force you to lie, to become a criminal, to put good, God-fearing people in jail for trying to what they believe is constitutional right, and they're right. Here's the deal. Part of me, I'm going to say this very lightly, okay? And you guys might tackle me and kick me out of here, okay? Part of me is happy to see these gun laws coming. It's a very small part. Why would I say that? I've been in a fight for 5 years for my constitutional rights. I've ran around the state to more fundraisers. I get a hotel room. I'm stalking political candidates in their town. I'm sitting down, I'm having coffee, I'm visiting. I got speed dialed in on my phone. 5 years I've been fighting to save my farm, and I scream I got constitutional rights. And nobody listens. You guys, I hope they pass. Welcome to the fight. I'm glad to have you alongside of me. Because it's a bunch of baloney. So I'm kind of hoping they pass, because we've been asleep at the wheel. I asked the sheriff. He said, well, our constitutional matters. Well, I asked the Sheriff's Association. I said, hey, can you write a letter? Since you're telling me it's unconstitutional for a game warden to come to my farm, could you just take Sheriff's Department letterhead and just write on there that it's unconstitutional for a game warden to come on my farm without search warrant or consent? Yeah, we don't want to do that. We don't want to get involved.
They want to lose his job.
The Sheriff's Association's a great big division with all this, but no, we're not getting involved. Get an attorney, fight it on your own. You took an oath to uphold the Constitution. I don't care if I'm a deer farmer. Everybody I arrested had constitutional rights. I had to protect their rights throughout the entire investigation. Oh, you don't want to talk? You have that right. I had to protect their constitutional, but now I'm retired and I don't have constitutional rights. So, what do I mean when I look at this and it says gun laws, biblical worldview? You guys, I'm just going to share this. I'm going to drop a bomb on you. Okay? If you look at it from a biblical worldview, and you look at it through anything else other than a biblical worldview, you're going to interpret the data wrong. You're going to do it wrong. You have to look at it from a biblical perspective. If you look and you think this is controlling, go home and Google digital currency. Just start Googling it, okay? And they're going to program our money. And they're going to say, yeah, we're only going to allow you to buy 5 pounds of beef a month for your family. It's programmed. You can't get it at the till. I can't believe I'm sitting here talking about gun laws. I can't even believe what I'm telling you is true. And now I'm going to talk to you about digital currency and risk. I'm a nut. But it's all over online if you search for it. It's coming, you guys. When will it be here? A year? Year and a half? They can shut your spending off. Digital currencies. It's on the fast track. It's coming here soon. Is this a big deal? Gun laws on top? Yep. There's a much bigger deal coming. Go home and Google digital currencies and see how fast that comes at us. Go ahead.
If I sell my guns to county and I don't report it in, they put me in jail?
The question is, if he sells his guns to his son and he doesn't report it, they'll put him in jail. You would break the law. You're the best guy to break the law at this point. I'm joking. Because you go into jail, how old are you?
I'll be 82.
82 years old, you just say, my heart doesn't feel good, I'm going to need an MRI, my teeth are hurting, and they're going to kick you loose so fast it'll make your head spin. Okay? So, but you the answer is yes. If you give your guns to your son and you don't go through all the paperwork, you'll be breaking the law. You guys, are these going to pass? Are they going to pass? They're making it. They've made it this far. But here's what I have for you now that's hopeful. Okay? I have 50 copies here. I think I have enough. When I went to Park Rapids with Stan, they told us that these bottom ones are Democrats. Now remember how I told you the Republicans are voting against these gun laws, Democrats for it? I stood up at the meeting. I'm gonna share this with you too. I stood up at the meeting and I had a Minnesota Deer Hunter Association member who stood up at the meeting and said, we're opposed, we don't want any gun laws. Minnesota Deer Hunter Association. They're the guys that have been working to run me out of business. Who do they work with to run and pass all these laws to run me out of business with? The DNR and 2 Democrats down in this Minnesota Capitol by the name of Rick Hansen and Jamie Becker Finn. So the Minnesota Deer Hunter Association, they partner and lobby and they're buddies and all these groups and they're just best friends and they're coming after me and I see it and I know it and I see it. And all of a sudden they stand up at the meeting and say, we're opposed to gun laws. I'm like, oh, who have you been working with to come after me? Rick Hansen and Jamie Becker Finn. Who's coming up with the gun laws? Oh, it's the same people.
Don't you wish you had said that to them instead of...
I did. And when I got done saying that, and I said, everybody in this room, you can say, well, it's not about politics. Okay, it's not about politics, but look up the record. It's 99% voting this way and that way by the left and the right. So I got done speaking, and I get excited, and I get red in the face, and I'm talking, and I'm like, you bugger. And all of a sudden, when I get done, Senator Green, he stands up. He said, I wasn't going to talk, you guys. I've had many conversations with Steve Porter, and I just want to tell everybody in the room, everything Steve just said is 100% correct. What did I say? You can't partner with these guys on one bit of legislation and then be shocked when these same guys you're working with are coming against you. You can't be shocked. I felt like telling people, if you're in the room and you want to keep your guns, raise your hand if you voted for these people. Oh, that's harsh. But can we accept the truth? I'm not telling the Republicans are all fantastic. I'm just telling you, look it up and see how they're voting. Just look it up and see how they're voting. Okay, so they gave me this list. These are Democrats on here.
That are walking the line.
That are walking the line. They said these are the most likely to flip. What does that mean? Some of these won their votes on the Democrat seat by 30 votes. They're living in a mixed population. It's not totally blue. It's red and blue. They won by 30 votes. So if you're going to get on the phone and you're going to raise heck, who are you calling? These people that barely won are the most likely to flip on this. How many votes do they need to get? What do you think? 2, 3, 4, 2? 2 or 3 votes would flip this around. But so far, they have not deviated left or right. The Republicans in the representatives and senates, they have not altered or derailed and changed one bill in any way, shape, or form coming forward.
How much would it take to buy it out?
That's a good question. That's a good question. Say that again?
Well, the one from Moorhead is probably the most likely.
The one from Moorhead, they say, is the most likely, but there are some in Duluth, yes. Yep. So I have copies of this, and you can take it, and are you going to be compelled to call and call and call? Yeah, I'll hand them all out here. I'll have 50. You can just start passing some up and down each side here. I'll keep my one copy here. Yeah, divide them up and down each side there. So my point is, you guys, I go on social media and I rant, okay? But I have had an impact. I have had an impact through exercising my right to free speech. You have the right to free speech. So go ahead, call. Do you think they're going to answer the phone when you call them? No. Not a chance. But you leave a message because someone's taking notes and they're going to let them know. You don't threaten anybody, okay? But you just tell them how they're going to be voted out of office. You're going to come down there and go door to door, and you're going to do everything in your power to get them voted out of office if this passes. What's that?
Send a 10-page email every hour and a half.
Send them emails and just do what you can. Yeah.
Just looking at the
Go ahead.
iceberg underneath there. If you're a cattle farmer, a hog farmer, that bottom is what they're trying to put on you as far as changing the board of animal health.
Right. So his comment is if you're a cattle farmer, a pig farmer, turkey farmer, the bottom of this, there's so much more stuff coming by the weaponization of these other boards, and they're doing it, but they're not telling us what's coming next. But I know what's coming because I've been fighting them for 4 or 5 years. You guys, I think there's a good chance of maybe half of this legislation disappearing. I think there's a good chance. However, we might not get any of it gone. Is there a good chance my farm survives? I really don't think there's a chance. I don't think there's one chance. Now, will I be out of business in May? No. But they'll pass the laws, and I'll get like a 3-year death sentence, and I won't be able to comply. What would be an example of what they're doing to me? They said, they have it on the books right now. I think it's still on the books. It's just an onslaught of laws against us. If I have a 14-day-old fawn, I have to have everything tagged. I have to have an inventory. Not one tag, 2, 1 in each ear, and an inventory. If the fawn's older than 14 days and it doesn't have a tag, that would automatically authorize the DNR to euthanize the deer. How do you guys think that'll go? They're on my farm. Fawn got its tags ripped out in a fence. They shred their ears. And it says the DNR could then euthanize. That's in the books. So what do? I call up the game warden in charge of this division, and I say, hey, you want to come on my farm and start shooting deer? Is that what this law says? He won't answer my phone. What are the other laws? It says that I will do a live test for CWD by July 1st of every year. And it has to be done now July 1st of 2023. So legislative session gets done in May. I got till July 1st to do a live test for CWD. It's not even a valid test. USDA doesn't recognize it. The test part voodoo. It might be 2. But the first was July 1st. Well, guess what, you guys? Can I run a lactating doe through a chute and do a test when she's full of milk and put her in a chute and squeeze her together? Nope. Can I separate a doe from her nursing fawns in July and run her in a chute? No. Can I run bucks in a chute in velvet? No. So they pass the law and I say, hey, I can't comply because I'll be hurting and killing animals. I could do it in January when there's no fawns on them and all the antlers are hard, and then I could run them through. But I can't do it when they're full of rut because there's too much testosterone. But I could do it in January. Well, we don't care. We want it by July 1st. So they pass the law. I can't comply. And they're saying, oh, you're not complying, you're going to court. But I can't comply. There's no way I can comply with that law. You've passed a law that I can't comply with. And they don't care. Guess how many meetings we've had with our administrative agency, the DNR, to talk about what we should or could do? 0. They don't want to hear from us. Anyway, that's enough on that. Any other questions in the room? How are we doing? We're way overdue on time. Gary, any other questions?
Well, this is kind of stupid.
Hold on. Go ahead.
Okay, I've got to carry. Yeah,
Permit to carry.
right. But I still got to jump through these hoops as far as licensing.
Yes.
Get a license for the pistol and
All of it.
insurance and everything.
Yes. So the question is, permit to carry, does he still need to jump through everything? And I'm saying yes, 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 and yes. Okay? Nobody in Ukraine is turning their guns in. Or registering. And you guys, if you're better history buffs than I am, do you have examples of where people had to turn their guns in?
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Right? A lot of yeses going on in the crowd. And it never ended good, did it? Okay. Any other questions? Go ahead.
They let them take their guns home.
World War I, they let them take them home.
Yeah, they let them take them home.
Yep.
But after the Civil War, the Confederates had to turn all their guns in.
Okay. Well, I can tell you this. I don't know if they're going to pass. Get on the phone, send emails, pray about it. You know what I mean? Tell your friends, get active. And next time you see me online ranting, you'll be like, no, I get your pain. And I'm welcoming all you guys to the fight. Thanks for attending. Because for me, it was me and Stan fighting unconstitutional rights for 4 or 5 years. And now all of a sudden we got a bigger audience and it's good. We might impact guns. We're not going to impact my deer farm. We might. Well, I don't know. When they've viciously attacked me for 4 or 5 years and they've harmed me so bad, why would they show mercy? Right.
To get these idiots out of office and get people in there with a brain,
Right.
and then you can keep your farm.
But I think it'll be dead and gone by then is what I'm saying. Right. Go ahead.
This is what you just done now should be done in every sports club in the state of Minnesota.
So his comment is, well, the presentation we just put on should be done in every conservation club in the state of Minnesota. But here's the here's the problem, you guys. I'm going to say this. I'm going to go out on a limb, and again, it's my opinion. There were 15 conservation clubs that voted, that wrote letters that said we need more rules against deer farm, basically to run them out of business. 15 conservation clubs were gathered up, God-fearing, I guess, people who love hunting and guns, and they said, hey, let's write a letter to run all these deer farms. We had 700 deer farms in the state. We're down to 150. The conservation clubs wrote letters to attack us. So I go up to the MDHA guy at the banquet, and I said, hey, you want to do this? And you know what he says to me? He says, we voted on it for these laws to come after you. Oh. To get rid of the bad ones. No, but let me finish my point. This sportsman club says there were he's telling me we had to vote against deer farms because there were some bad deer farms that didn't do things right and they could have spread CWD. So now all of you guys that are deer farmers got to reap the rewards. You got to live with it. And I said, that's fantastic. That's your philosophy for deer farms? Yes. And I said, I got news for you. There were some bad guys with guns. And now you got to live with it. Right? So I'm just saying, what I'm telling you about conservation clubs, I get your point. You have a good point. But what you don't realize is the conservation clubs they've been infiltrated with people who worship animals and the earth. That's what they're doing. These conservation clubs, they worship the animals more than they do anything else or rights or constitution. And they really don't care about it. And they don't care about it. I'm saying most of our conservation clubs, have been infiltrated by a green agenda. And animals come first, people last, and rights last, and constitution last. Anyway, I'm done.
Well, wait, one thing.
Yep.
When you made the traffic stop and the guy was speeding, and you could see the guy behind him was speeding, did you pick up both of them?
Did I pick up both of them? Maybe one time in my life, but it's hard because if one doesn't stop, he keeps on going. Yeah, you can't do it. Explain it in detail a little better.
Well, if you said 150 are left in the state.
Of our deer farms, we went from 700 deer farms to 150.
True.
Yep.
But then why did they shut down that many if they were all doing the same thing?
So what they've done is they've taken away our income. So I'm still hanging on by a thread because they attack and they say, okay, you can't go to sports shows anymore, Steve, but only for 30 days. So I forfeit all my contracts. I'm out the money. One, I fought, I won, but I had to forfeit the rest. Then a little bit later, they do it again and again and again. Pretty soon I can't get a contract, so I can't make money. So the people that were making less money, pretty soon their feed bill is more than they're taking in. They bailed out sooner. They were maybe a young farm. They weren't developed. And the 150 are left were established. We're fighting like crazy, but we might not be able to survive as well. I hope that explains it. It's terrible. Right.
But I don't believe that, we should stop the ones that are doing it legally, and shut them down with that.
Right, but again, if your comment is the ones that are doing it illegally, there was nobody really doing it illegally, but they're saying there were people that in firearms that are bad, and there's people in deer farms that are bad. But now they're telling me that there's people that aren't producing the right amount of carbon on their land, so we're going to kind of go after them. Nutrient runoff, they're not doing that right in farming, so we got to impose some more restrictions on nutrient runoff and nitrogen because they're not good farmers, and it's just coming together. Pick a topic. Okay, I'm done.
Amen. Amen. I told you guys this guy knows what he's talking about, and you could see that. And I hope you all got some degree of an education, because that's what alerted me. I talked to them 2 minutes and went, I'm being educated here. I think other guys will want to be. Are you available to ask if people want to come up to you afterwards? Can you stay in? So some of you are still going to have more questions. You just don't like to speak out in a group like this, and I get that. So Steve will stick around for a little bit. I want to just come back to just one thing to wrap it up, and we'll be done. The Joshua was giving his final plea to the people of Israel after they had settled the land. And he makes them aware of the circumstances around them and calls them to a decision. He says, now therefore fear the Lord, serve him in sincerity and in truth, and put away the gods which your father served on the other side of the river and in Egypt. Serve the Lord. And if it seems evil to you to serve the Lord, choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your father served that were on the other side of the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. The reason that I share that, guys, is simply this. If you're picking up what Steve says, we have a decision to make. There's a decision to be made, and Joshua would be saying to the people, don't just sit there passively. You've got to make a decision one way or another. And I think minimally, Steve has challenged us with a decision. We can at least engage with some phone calls and some emails. And that's why he has this information here. But I truly believe we're coming to a place in our country, guys, where it's just this simple. You and I, as husbands, as fathers, as grandfathers, we're going to have to start drawing some lines. We better know where we're going to decide and what we're going to decide. And I'm not trying to tell you what that is for you. I'm just saying you can no longer not make a decision and engage. That's what I'm getting at. Because if we just sit back, it just keeps rolling over us. And it's not going in a good direction. Okay?
Gary here? So Gary's a good friend. He has the man cave. Gary, could you tell? It is good. Gary comes in. He calls it a Bible study, but sometimes he'll talk about world events, and that's all we get done, looking at it through a biblical perspective. And so I just want Gary to tell us when that is, and anybody that wants to attend the man cave.
We meet the first and third Mondays of every month. We start at 6:30 with a little food. We have some fellowship. We generally will be in the Word and try and encourage one another in our walks with the Lord. And all men over the age of 18 are welcome every first and third Monday of the month. Okay? That's what we do. And I should say one other thing relative to that, why I felt it was necessary to bring Steve in. A year ago, we sat down as the ministry of the Man Cave, and we just had a little discussion among ourselves. What is it that makes us who we are? What is it that seems to identify us? And what the guys sitting there, who are part of this regular ministry, said, we identify around hunting and fishing. Thus, you know how it's built in there, right? We're not a motorcycle club, although some of them have motorcycles, okay? We don't do quilting. It's the hunting and the fishing is what we really enjoy together and talk about. And that just gives us a center of focus. That's why when Steve is educating me about here's what's coming through with gun laws, I thought, our guys need to know about this. Because this does hit to who we are. In another 2 weeks, we'll all be at not all, but a number of us will be going to Cooperstown Bible Camp. One of the things we love to do there is we bring our guns. And there's a handgun competition, and we do shotguns, and we just have a great time fellowshipping together. We're in the Word. They bring in a great speaker. It's all good. But what first got us even going there was, guys know that there's going to be some shooting competitions, and that's where we want to be engaged. So I'm just telling you, this is kind of who we have been. This is what we've decided. Right here, Dave Snell, he takes us fishing once a year. We go out on Trout Lake. We actually have, it's not any major thing, but after being to Cooperstown a couple of times, we went and bought a clay pigeon thrower just for kicks and giggles. And Dan Tronfet, where am I seeing Dan here somewhere? Where's Dan? All right, he has readily welcomed us out to his place. And so we go out on a Saturday morning and we have breakfast first. We go out and we shoot clays together. We just have a good time of fellowship. Our number one priority is Jesus Christ. But we enjoy as men the shooting sports and the fishing. We enjoy this. And we have a post-hunting supper every year where after the deer season, guys come and they tell their hunting stories and it's a good time. We pick a winner. It's a good time. It's just who we are. And yeah, so you asked me to say something relative to that. That's that. But we have a decision to make, guys. We have a decision. Things are moving in a direction that is, I believe, straight from the dark kingdom is where it's coming from. I'm going to close in prayer. Steve will be with us if you have any other questions, okay? Father, thank you for the joy of being with these men. And Lord, you've placed it upon our hearts that there are things we need to pay attention to. And Father, I pray that we will think in terms of being husbands, being fathers, being grandfathers, being men, and protecting those around us and what that might mean and what it might look like. And may each of us, Lord, take seriously this decision as it is before you, that we know we have to answer for this decision one day. So move in our hearts in ways that are pleasing to you, and may each of us hear your voice clearly and effectively. Thank you for Steve, who's come and so graciously shared of all of his knowledge tonight, Lord. And we ask you to encourage him as he continues to fight, not only for his deer farm, but for this next place where a battle is going to be fought. And something that Father, we do believe that that our rights are supposed to be available to us, Lord, and yet we're seeing them eroded little by little by little. And we just ask you, give us wisdom in all of that. May Jesus Christ be honored. May each one of us come to know him in a personal way, we ask. In his name, amen. Amen. Thanks, guys. Appreciate having all of you here tonight. There's any food left. It's starting to get cold,